Being in love simply isn't enough. At least, not if you want to create the kind of passionate, dirty, crazy, electrical connection that keeps your partner craving more. In this episode, we are diving into what actually works to create mind blowing intimacy that goes beyond just another hookup or routine relationship. Because the truth is, maybe you've noticed that that initial spark tends to fade, even in a great relationship. Or maybe you're wondering why simply caring about someone deeply doesn't automatically translate to amazing sex. Welcome back to The Naked Connection. This is the show that supports driven men to reach sexual mastery and build deep connections. Take a moment right now and be sure to hit subscribe so that you don't miss a single episode. It's Kirsten, and today we are joined by Angela Ivy Leong. She is a Tantra practitioner, a psychotherapist, and a researcher who is here to share 3 surprisingly simple tantric practices that tap into something deeper than just physical attraction or emotional love. So, with that, let's get some. Angela Ivy Leong, welcome to The Naked Connection. I'm so excited we're doing this today.
Me too. Thanks for having me, Kirsten.
Could you kick us off by first explaining what is this KISS method that you explore in your work?
So, KISS, KISSS, stands for ketamine induced self and sexuality synchronization. So, we use ketamine assisted psychotherapy to assist people with sexual dysfunctions, to enhance their connections and their relationships with others. But it also takes into consideration that there's a whole self actualization component that needs to go into this, like the healing of yourself, of your own traumas, and to understand what is your purpose here on earth. That is a key part of having healthy, successful relationships. When you're in a relationship, if you want that relationship to be solid, you and your partner need to understand and figure out what is your mission and your purpose for being together. And I think not enough people have thought that through before getting into a relationship. And that's why they tend to fail. Love is not enough. Love is it's a feeling, it's fleeting, and it's definitely supportive of the whole process. And love can actually even be healing, but it doesn't heal everything, right? If you haven't figured out what is the purpose for you being on this earth and what is the purpose of you being with this partner that you've chosen, that's a shaky foundation to build love on,
Mm,
right? So
yeah.
ketamine is introduced here to help people process that a little bit more deeply and to get through any rigid thinking that they may have with regards to sexual dysfunction, trauma, how they see themselves in the world, how they see the other, um, any sort of sticky thinking process that doesn't serve you anymore. That's how ketamine supports this process. I mean, people have also talked about ketamine as being this substance that induces a lot of sensuality and love and feeling a connection with source and so on. So there's a big spirituality component with ketamine. And
Mm.
that's why we also bring in these tantra components into the KISS method as well.
Yeah, can we explore that a little bit? I'm curious of and whether that's looking at this tantric component of your
Mhm.
methodology or otherwise about how to integrate more of that into someone's experience.
So first of all, what is tantra? Tantra is it's a set of ancient practices from India. It was originally an oral tradition, it was passed on orally, from person to person. And it was first documented in writing by Chinese Buddhists around 600 CE. So it's actually a set of practices that uses sexuality to evoke spiritual development, enlightenment, if you will.
Mhm.
And a lot of my teaching was around white tantra, which is for this purpose of enlightenment. But there's also red tantra, which is just for the enjoyment of sexuality for its own sake. And
Mhm.
then there's black tantra, which is kind of more like working with the dark arts there.
Mhm.
Um, with regards to how this integrates into sex therapy in my practice, I mean, I think a lot of couples come in not realizing how powerful sexual connection is and how healing that it could be. And one of the first things I try to get them to embody, which I've learned from my tantra practices is the power of eye contact.
Mm,
There's something really profound
mhm,
about eye contact that you hold, right? Which is unwavering, sort of like eye contact when you connect left eye to left eye. And it's, they say it's a window to the soul for that reason, that it can evoke a lot in people. I think a lot of times people have learned to avoid eye contact because they're hiding something that they're ashamed about inside. There's something really erotic about like when our partners, they see us,
mm,
right? I
mhm,
think men and women, we all crave to be seen in all of us, and there's nothing more sexy and erotic than that level of emotional connection.
mhm. And for anyone listening, just like thinking about the practice of eye gazing and
Mm-hmm.
how like entering into that, whether it is before, during a sexual experience or otherwise, it can be, I mean, profoundly moving and emotional in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different ways. So I guess thinking about it, like if someone's with their partner, what would be the way that you would recommend starting to invite just this very first component of a tantric practice into their life?
Totally. You just want to set aside a few moments at the end of the day
Mm,
to just eye gaze, as I said, connecting your left eye to the other person's left eye. And you can set a timer for up to 7 minutes.
mm,
You can even play a song in the background and just try to see, what are these eyes trying to, what are they trying to say to me? What are the deeper layers of this person that's beyond the physical,
mm,
right? In Tantra, we were taught that there's 5 subtle bodies, right? That there's like an emotional layer, a cognitive layer, there's a spiritual layer, an energetic layer, and then there's like the karmic seed of someone,
mm,
right? And you're looking into like the origins of like where their soul came from. And to connect with someone this deeply is profound.
mm,
I mean, most people haven't been looked at that deeply.
mm,
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite things to teach in my tantra workshops. I had actually taught it at Burning Man the last time I went, and people were saying that it was the most profound experience that they've ever had at Burning Man. It was like their favorite moment, having someone see some really private part of them, like
mm,
a total stranger, without having known any details about their life, was able to kind of pinpoint seeing who
mm.
exactly that they were.
Yeah.
And as you know, like with couples, it's so important for us to constantly be looking at our partners with fresh eyes, to continuously be curious about them, to
Mm,
ask yourself, like, is there something that I don't know yet, that I haven't learned yet? Because we're fighting against this biological imperative to habituate, which means to to just get used to someone being there. You can kind of trust that they're not going to go away. Like they're unchanging. And in pop culture we say that, we call that taking for granted, right? But there's a reason why we habituate. It
mm,
serves us, right? When we can sort of like acknowledge that this person is like there, I don't need to do anything to sort of like keep their attention or make sure that they're attached to me. I can focus on other things in my life, building my business, making money, raising children.
mm,
So there's a reason our brains decide to do this, right? And sometimes we had to remind ourselves to get out of that if we want to continue to maintain this sense of erotic connection with our partner,
mm.
that they're not just a wallpaper, right? They're not just a furniture that you've kind of gotten used to as part of your environment,
Mhm. Yeah.
that they're an ever-changing person as well.
Mm,
And you better keep track of that ever-changing person before they've changed into something that you don't know anymore,
mhm,
that you've lost touch with. You haven't changed alongside them.
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I especially when a couple has been together for so long, I think there's kind
Mm-hmm.
of these assumptions that start to form of like, "Oh, I know them. I know them through and
Mm-hmm.
through," or "I I don't need to ask them this question because I know what they're gonna say because 2 years ago I asked them and they gave me an answer." And so it's
Totally.
like looking
Exactly.
at your partner through the lens of like, this is someone that I will never fully
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
And then that creates, I would imagine, this sense of like perpetual newness that I think we want and crave, right? Like the newness and the
Exactly.
novelty. And like you can find that within the person because they are new and so are you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so many different ways to create novelty within your relationship,
Mm.
but people don't get I mean, there's things that block creativity, and that's mental health stuff, right? And that's why often, like, people that I'm seeing in my practice, like, I'm often dealing with that first layer of stuff, which is mental health conditions, before I can even help them access that creativity. Like, a part of my method is like to help them clear like all this unprocessed stuff so they can access the truth of who they are, right? This calm, curious, connected, and creative self that's within them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, I'm wondering, so we have some, maybe they're like, okay, I've got the eye gazing down. I'm doing that. We're connecting at night. What else could be brought into that
Mm.
space?
Yeah, my favorite one to teach people from tantric practices is the yab yum. It's
Mm.
where the smaller partner, usually that's the female, but the person that's of a smaller stature would sit on top of the other person that's, so your partner will be sitting cross-legged on the floor, and you'll be sitting on top with your legs perpendicular from his body, sort of behind him, usually the male, right? Um, and you could either touch forehead to forehead and just rock back and forth. You can even eye gaze from this vantage point and rock back and forth. It's very intimate because your whole chakra system will be aligned and touching with each other.
Mm.
Like your genitals will be grazing each other but not inserted, right? And that whole rocking back and forth is also very soothing, and then it's a very evocative of parent-child relationships. And what you can add to that as well is like the breath work, right? As you breathe into his mouth, he will inhale your breath and rock backwards, and as he breathes out into her mouth, and she'll inhale that in and rock backwards. So there's something also really erotic inducing about that breath work as well. You're exchanging energy between the two of you,
Mhm.
if you believe in that, right?
Yeah.
um, and that's something that I learned from my tantra teachers here in British Columbia, Krista
Mm.
and Naomi. And even with a perfect stranger, there can be an energy that's produced, right? And with your partner, there can be some intensity that you may not expect to be produced from that as well.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
meant to be a meditative practice. It's meant to be like an energy chakra awakening practice,
Mm.
an exchange of masculine and feminine energies. It's a really like beautiful nightly wind down routine that I
Mm.
like to recommend to my couples.
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Mhm.
this. It's so interesting to me because it can be very accessible and like you could do both of these for 10 minutes and like 5 minutes of eye gazing, 5 minutes of yab yum with breath. And like within that 10 minutes, create an incredible connection between the two of you.
Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like a
which
different
I love.
kind of energetic connection, right?
Mhm.
I think people don't realize that Master and Johnson, the originators of a lot of concepts that we use in sex therapy, including the intervention called sensate focus,
Mhm.
they were inspired by tantric scriptures to develop what they developed. So a lot of like what modern sex therapy is was inspired by tantra.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
Well, and, ah, I'm wondering, like, let's say that someone's on board and they're like, "I wanna start here, I wanna dive into these things," but then their partner, they're, like, afraid that maybe their partner would be, like, turned off by it, or maybe they feel uncomfortable being like, "Hey, I wanna try this." Because I think bringing something new, or maybe even, like, if someone is dating someone and they're in the beginning stages of
mm,
exploring their sexuality together, like how to invite in something that might not
mm,
necessarily be like mainstreamed normal. Like, I could see someone being like,
Mm.
"Oh, this is gonna be awkward if I ask this girl to, like, straddle me and, like, breathe into my mouth," you know?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that's more in the category of sexual shyness, right?
Mm,
If you feel shy or self-conscious about introducing something new into your sexual relationship or your relationship in general, this is where people tend to end up into stalemates, whether it's tantra or not, right?
mhm,
Because our sexual needs can change over time. Like we do have as a human species, we do have an appreciation for novelty and what takes us by surprise.
mm,
And when things start to get methodical and mechanical, you need to kind of stop and ask yourselves, like, is there something new that I can incorporate today?
mm,
Something different. And if there's shyness around that, then that's something that we need to work on in therapy as to like, what is that shyness about? Does this
mm,
shyness spread into other areas in your life? Is this sort of like a ubiquitous sort of shyness problem that we have to sort of like deal with? Or is it just specific to sexual shyness? Like what happened in your life that led to you feeling shy about asking a partner to try something new?
mm. Yeah.
It really goes down to basics like that before you even before it's not about like needing to adopt fancy methods. It's about asking yourself like what is this discomfort and shyness about.
Mm,
So the way that I think of my method is that it's very holistic. If there's stuff that's in you that has not healed, it's going to show up in your relationship.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
that's why there's like a self. One of the S's stands for self, right? You need to synchronize yourself with that partner, but still remain yourself. You
Mm,
cannot lose yourself, but there's a certain amount of flexibility that you need to have to create a third entity, a harmonious relationship with your partner.
mm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so interesting how what unfolds in our sex life and in just in intimate exchanges with people can like really bring out
Mm-hmm.
like the shadows or the reality of the rest of our life. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that I love most about this is how connected it all is and how almost like a mirror our sex life is with the rest of our self and our life as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just told one of my clients today that you get what you put out there, right? Life is a mirror.
Mhm. Yeah.
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 So it's really important to sort of make sure that you have clarity as to like who you are and that you've dealt with a good amount of like your stuff, right? At least you're aware of it, right?
Yeah.
You can't expect your partner to do all of your healing for you. I mean, like I think there is some amount of like healing together, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Your childhood habits of how you relate with other people, especially close, intimate others, are going to show up when you enter into a relationship.
Mhm.
And you're going to learn about that in a relationship when any relationship that you enter into.
Mm. For a man that maybe is like really wanting to advance what's unfolding in his relationship, like from this tantric space, like, do you have any insight on like a practice or just a perspective about how to, whether it's like enhancing arousal or just deepen the dynamic within the partnership?
I do. I think most men are probably thinking about what about semen retention? Is
Mm.
that gonna am I going to be able to bring more sexual potency via semen retention? And I think the answer, at least personally, the answer is yes, right? There's a lot of eroticism and sort of watching a man
Mm.
go through that much devotion to try to master these
Mhm.
aspects of the body for your pleasure and for his own pleasure too, right? There's men can become multi-orgasmic,
Mhm.
and there's something really it's energetically different when you sort of like can see a man as like kind of trying to activate those parts of him
Mhm.
to bring all that energy from like his root chakra all the way up to this crown chakra, the quality of sex becomes different.
Mm. Yeah.
That's all I have to say, right? So,
Yeah,
I mean,
many moons ago, I had Taylor Johnson on the show, and we talked, like, extensively
mhm,
about semen retention, and yeah, there's definitely a power that comes when an individual takes it upon themselves to
mhm,
master this part of themselves that otherwise it's
mhm,
almost like in the world, the opposite is kind of being shared of, like, there's sex kind of everywhere and, like, to spread your seed all over, and so thinking, like, if a man is able to, like, master that within himself and choose when and how to exchange that energy, there's a lot of power
mhm.
behind that.
Yeah, and I'm not an advocate of like seminal retention for years and years for the rest of your life, like some people have suggested in some scriptures. Even Sarita, who was one of my teachers in Bali, she says that the Taoists have actually figured out a good formula. When you're in your 20s, you can ejaculate once a week. When you're in 30s, once every 2 weeks. When you're in your
Mm,
40s, once a month. That
interest
is the general recommendation, um, according to the Taoists. And that might be right for you, that might not be right for you, but either way, you should talk to your partner about like what feels good for them,
Mhm.
right? Because everyone's so individual and so different, right? She might want you to hold on for like 3 hours so you can have a 3 hour sex date. um I think this is Kim Anami's suggestion, is like you need to make space once a week for your 3 hour sex date. That's your gourmet sex, right? And I'm an advocate of that, right? But I'm often working with people with very busy lives, right?
Mhm.
And they're trying to accomplish a lot, and it may not be the time in your life to have a 3 hour sex date every week, right? But definitely prioritize that in your life somehow, right? Your sexual connection, because it is a path towards enlightenment. It is
Mhm.
a path towards healing. I have heard of people able to spontaneously process some trauma that they've experienced during sex,
Mhm.
right? I have heard of people connecting with a sense of godliness through sex, right? And if if at the very least, I mean, like it's just another variety of having sex. If you don't believe in tantra or spirituality, you're not a spiritual person, it's fine, right?
Mhm.
But these scriptures do have some ideas how to as to like how to add a sense of variety, some variety into your everyday routine,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. There's
Mm-hmm.
there's just an endless discovery, and I know that we've just kind of dropped in lightly to exploring the work that
Mm-hmm.
you do and this incredible kiss method that you've developed. I so appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing everything
Mm-hmm.
that we dove into and exploring the realms of sex, of psychedelics, of spirituality, of all of it. So thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a joy to finally connect with you.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's been
Yeah.
such a pleasure. Super looking forward to doing this again.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of The Naked Connection. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode. Trust me on this, your sex life and that special someone in your life will thank you for it. And if you really love the show, please take a moment and leave a 5-star review or a written review and let me know what you think. It would mean so much to me and this show. Until next time, happy connecting.